All right. And I think we are live streaming on YouTube, Facebook. Welcome to At Home Songwriting. This is the 2023 wrap up, year end wrap up. We're going to talk about songwriting and all kinds of other things. So I'm glad that you're hopping along as we kind of wrap up what's been a really interesting year and a good year on the songwriting front. And I'm going to have fun talking to my guest. He's my friend. We've co-written a bunch of songs together, and some of you may know him from some of the workshops and things as well. But welcome to the channel, Paul Backermann. Paul, welcome.
Hey, Chad. Good to be here.
Yes, before we were coming on here, we were talking about how the year's kind of wrapping up. We're heading into a new year, and I thought this would be a fun way to kind of wrap things up as the final thing for 2023. So I'm glad that you hopped along.
Absolutely. What can be better than just chatting about music and such, huh?
For sure. Yeah, and as I mentioned, you and we've known each other a few years now. Shortly after I think, did we meet before or after the pandemic? Was it before?
It was before. There were actually some in-person contacts. We
Okay.
met face to face at a couple coffee shops.
Yeah. Well, we met at Erica Hansen had a songwriting
Yes,
workshop at her house, so that's where we actually met the first time. So
that was
yeah.
a first.
So yeah,
Yeah,
anybody out there, if you want to hire me to do workshops at your house, hey, let me know.
it's fantastic. I'll give props to Chad.
I just require a charcuterie board. That's the only thing that, you know.
I never even heard that word until like a week ago, and now it's everywhere. Everywhere I go, charcuterie boards.
Yeah, yeah. I never knew what they were called. I just thought of it as like a meat tray, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
meat, crackers, cheese, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy. So it's been over 3 years that we've known each other, but you and I have co-written songs together. We've, gone to a lot of different things music related. Um, Looks like we have some people showing up in the chat already. Tamra's in London. Hey, Tamra.
Some.
Good to see you. It must be kind of late there, right? Must be about midnight or something. Thanks for staying up with us there. Um, but Paul, how was 2023 for you musically? I know you've done quite a few things. So what's been happening?
It was a busy year for me. I jumped into the singer songwriter challenge on Facebook. So I did 2 cycles of that so I wrote 20 songs for that thing this year. And that was really good for me because it forced me to really make writing more of a habit instead of just something that can be swept aside for a little while. There were deadlines, and that was helpful for me. I released some music finally after a while, did an album and kind of cleaned out the back closet so I can start working on some of the stuff I wrote in the Songwriter Challenge. And I took a few classes online and such, so it's been busy.
Awesome. So tell us about the CD that you released. I know you and I had a song on there, which is pretty cool, or at least one. Is it just one that we had?
Just one. Got to save them all. You got to
Yeah.
ration them out. Yeah. There's a song we did for, I think it was one of the challenges for Minnesota Association of Songwriters.
I
And
think we did.
called it Once in a Blue Moon because there actually was a blue moon. So that's a picture I took out my back door and photoshopped it together. And these are
Awesome.
songs that kind of go back to the pandemic. I just never put them anywhere. So it was time to package them up and put them on a CD.
So we have Jeanette is saying hello from Chicago. We have Wally that's joining us. Ron in Massachusetts is with us. And
Awesome.
Tamara says, yes, it's around midnight there. So yeah, she's staying up on a school night. That's awesome.
I was in England this summer, Tamara. It's fantastic. We had a great time over there. In fact, I wrote one of my song challenges, the songs. I didn't have my guitar and such. So I used my iPad and my iPhone, hiding in the bathroom after my wife went to sleep, trying to write a song for the contest so I didn't miss a deadline from
Oh, that's
England.
awesome. And the good news is you didn't get arrested in England. So that's the best
I
part.
did not.
Tamara said, where in England did you go?
I was on a tour of southern England, so down through Canterbury and Salisbury and Stonehenge, and then we went over to the Celtic coast over there, and then we went up to Wales and across to London.
Awesome.
Great
Did you
trip.
to any live music when you were gallivanting around?
We didn't. I would have loved to. We were going to head up to Liverpool, and then it just didn't work into the deal. But maybe next time I'll have to go back.
Wally's in Pennsylvania, so we've got Pennsylvania in the
Very cool.
house too. Um, so yeah, so I what I kind of told Paul about this live stream was like, let's just hang out, see what people want to talk about, and let's kind of wrap up 2023 and kind of talk about the things that we've learned, things that we've done. Um, so working on your project and those song things, is there anything else that you've kind of been focusing on music wise this year, Paul?
I built a guitar. That was fun.
Built a guitar.
It was a kit, but there we go. My
Wow.
ES335 knockoff. So it was a kit, but that was fun. I learned a lot about the actual instrument. That was cool.
Yeah.
Took some classes from studio. It used to be monthly. I'm taking one now on Nashville production, and I've got another one that I started from Shane McNally on songwriting. So that's been kind of just, and I've taken and part of some of your sessions. Did a little retreat with the Minnesota Association of Songwriters. I've been actually about as busy in songwriting this year as I've been in a long time. So
That's awesome. I made a list of some of the things that I did this year because I thought, well, if I just go in cold, I'm going to totally space out and not remember things that I did. And what would be cool is if people watching, if you want to list things that you have accomplished or things that you've done, mostly music related, but if there's big life things, you can, say that as well. But so some of the things that I did, first off, I met a lot of great people through songwriting. I think which is the funnest thing. I think I've met people through YouTube. I've met people through the different local organizations. One of the things that I have on my list is I started teaching with Berkeley this year, so that's a big thing. So I've met a ton of cool people that way. I launched my first online courses. My YouTube channel got monetized, which took over a year and a half to actually do. I attended the first 2 live retreats that I've ever gone to. I've never gone to songwriting treats before. So I went in the spring to Andrea Stolpe's in the Catskills, which was awesome. And then we had the MAS workshop that was in October. Started doing these live streams. I met other YouTubers like Joseph from Songwriter Theory. If you haven't checked out his site, check out Songwriter Theory. I think I released 11 singles.
all
I think
right.
that's how many I released. And then I wrote a lot and really just worked on my craft. Oh, and I taught a week-long songwriting workshop for a university in Sweden. So that was fun.
Wow. How'd you
So
get
yeah,
connected to Sweden?
I met people through Andrea Stolpe's retreat. Actually, they were here and took the retreat as well. So, the music world is really all about people you meet and who you network with. So I think getting in person and meeting people, and just through community, even online, even through Zoom groups, you can meet people, and that's a good connection too.
I have
Um,
found that really true, Chad. And, like this group that you have, your at home songwriting, the folks in there are fantastic. Just great to hang out with them. And then like through the Minnesota through the singer songwriter challenge, you start following people and the music they're putting out, go to a show that they're putting on, and you make those connections. It really is about that human connection and how much you can grow that way. It's pretty fantastic.
well, yeah, and being with your people, being able to talk about building a guitar or talk about like, well, what preamp are you using, or like talking about rhyme schemes or like different things within songwriting. Like if you're just with everyday people or like your family, you start talking about that stuff and they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, but when you're with your people, that's what's really cool. So Wally commented, he's building a guitar too. He's building an acoustic from a kid. So that's cool.
I am not up to acoustic, Wally. Good for you. I'm proud of you, because that's a tough deal.
Isn't there, Paul, here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, I think there's somebody who actually makes guitars from scratch, right? Like there's some guitar makers that actually
I'm
make
sure
the
there
wood
are.
and do all that stuff.
My brother's done it. He built a guitar. He went to Menards and he bought the lumber and he made an acoustic guitar. I mean,
Wow.
his father-in-law kind of taught him how to do it. And there's people that do it all over the place. We just don't know about it. We need a community. We need a tribe of guitar builders, I think.
What's interesting about guitar is everyone has its personality and everyone has like a different sound to it, which I think is not something you get from electronic instruments. And I know that some people would be like, well, yeah, because the electronic instruments suck. Well, it's like, no, they're just instruments. They're different tools, right? Like,
But
guitars.
don't you think with electronic music that you make it unique by how you kind of tweak it? And
Yeah.
because they're the same out of the box, but they're not the same when they hit your recording.
Yes. True.
If you tweak them, if you do something with the different functions and controls in there. But you're right on guitars. I mean, the first guitar I bought, I went to the store and I played 5 of the exact same model. One of them blew the other 4 away. So that's when it's just the wood.
There was a story that I heard, and I don't know if this is true. Sometimes there's mythology that comes out of music, but I had heard that they tested like 60 of the same microphone on Michael Jackson when they recorded Thriller. And they picked the ones that, or like 1 or 2 that sounded the best out of the 60, but they were the literal same model, but they picked the ones that sounded the best. Yeah, it'd be nice to have the money to buy 60 like SM7s, but whatever.
And I don't think they chose even close to the most expensive one for Michael Jackson either, did they?
No, they used
SM7 or a SM57. One of those. It was just a dynamic mic.
Yeah, it's the SM7, which is the ancestor of the SM7Bs that we can get now. So you can't get an SM7, I don't think, new anymore, but they're the like podcasting mic that everybody has. I have one.
Yep. I believe I have that mic too.
It's this one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch the Thriller documentary, there's a new documentary that's out. You can actually see the back of this that they have it hooked up. I'm just going to set that right there.
Yeah, I was watching a show on Brandy Carlisle was talking about her recording some of her new stuff, and she just used an SM57, which is one that you usually use to mic and amp, because she was blowing out all the other ones. I mean, she's got such pipes and the producer was like, "You can't just use a 57." She said, "We're using a 57. That's what works."
I mean, what I kind of learned this year actually is if it sounds good, it is good. Exactly. Like it doesn't matter what it is. And same thing with like if it's breaking quote unquote rules or something. If it works, it works. If it's right, it's right. Right? Like that's, who cares if it doesn't fit the mold, or who cares if it isn't the proper way to do something? Like if it works, it works.
And have you fallen in? I know I've fallen into this trap that I just obsess over all the little details to the point where I don't get on with my songwriting. It's like I just worry about, do I have this setting exactly correctly, or do I have this mic in the right spot? Sometimes you just got to wipe that aside and just get on with the creative process too.
So I've been watching videos with this guy. His name is Jeff Ellis, and he's a professional mixer. And he does a lot of like big time like hip hop stuff. Victor said, quoting Duke Ellington. I don't know. Did I?
What was that quote? I'm curious now.
Yeah, Victor, what did we say? But anyway, Jeff Ellis, he was saying that you get into what's called mixer brain.
Sure.
And he said that we stop listening as people who enjoy music, and we look at every little thing that's wrong with it. And he actually played Billie Jean and said, listen to this mix and write down listen to this mix and write down everything that sounds wrong in the mix. So kind of going into mixer brain. And if you listen to Billie Jean, the shaker is super loud. The kick drum is really weak. The vocal is buried in the mix. And it's one of the most played songs ever. And nobody that actually enjoys the song gives a shit about if it's not mixed technically well because it feels good. Oh, Victor, if it sounds good, it is good. I didn't know that's where Duke Ellington came from. I've just
I
heard
don't
people
know
say
either.
that. That's cool.
Well,
But
it's like the 808, right? When the 808 came out, it was panned horribly. People said that sounds terrible. So they all got, pawned off to the pawn shop, and all of a sudden, the folks that didn't have any money and wanted to make hip hop and some of this new stuff said, "Let's use that." And they took it and they owned it and they made something super cool out of it. So now
yep.
everybody wants it.
And now the 808 is like the sound of
Yeah.
hip hop. Yeah.
And if you have an original one, you got gold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I think that, listening to the things about mixing made me think a lot about songwriting and things that, obviously I teach songwriting, so I'm teaching tools and tendencies and techniques. And some people say like, oh, it's just all formula. I don't want to write formulas. But the reality is certain genres, there are structure that just works. Like, think of it as cooking. Like, I don't care if you want to just make a pile of whatever you want to make, but if you want to make certain things, you actually kind of have to follow a little bit of a recipe, right? But that doesn't mean that following that recipe doesn't give you a chance to add your own flavor to it, right? Like, you can spice it up the way that you want to. And if you want to use rice instead of noodles, like, go for it, right? Like, just because, I don't know, somebody said somewhere that this is how you do something, that doesn't mean that you have to do that.
Like, what percentage of your songs would you say, Chad, follow one of the just traditional song structures?
Oh, everyone.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could spend a whole year or more just writing verse, chorus, bridge, chorus.
Right.
And it works great.
And some people will say, well, what if I don't want to do that? Well, you don't have to do it, but people are so used to hearing it that gets associated with a certain level of technique. You know what I mean? Like, and the most important thing is that you have sections that sound different from each other, because if it sounds the same for too long, people will tune out. Like, that's the most important thing.
So here's something I was actually listening to on this production course that I'm taking, and I didn't think of it this way, but the producer takes a song, dumps it into Pro Tools, which is what he uses, doesn't really matter. But every 4 bars, he colors a different color. He said something has to change every 4 bars. It could be adding in an instrument. It could be changing a rhythm. It could be something has to change, and something has to acknowledge each of those changes. Could be a drum fill, could be a vocal run. Something has to happen every 4 measures. And that was more granular than what I had been thinking.
But listen to songs though, like every 4 measures, there's usually some form of like little ear candy thing. And it's so the thing about recording and the thing about production is we can only like hear like up to like 3 things well at a time. So anything over 3 things sort of becomes like filler, right? So a lot of popular music, you have your vocal, your kick, and your snare, and maybe the bass. Those are the things that drive the song. Everything else, sorry, guitar players, that's just filling in the blank, right? The groove and what moves the people is the kick, the snare, the bass, and the vocal. So what you have to think about is when you're producing is what is the star of that section, right? So what is the part that you want to stand out? So even little tweaks like adding just a little shaker in the back after 4 bars is enough to keep some interest in your listener.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Do you find this that there's kind of a fine line between being a producer and a writer?
My style of writing has always been songwriting and production mixed together because I produce and I record, and songwriting, it's all the same process. So yeah, I think the line is starting to blur more and more all the time, for sure.
And I think in the pop world, a lot of those songs get written right at the production deck.
Yes.
They're building the song as they're writing the song. Now, it's been kind of interesting for me because when I did my CD, that's kind of how I did it.
Yeah.
But when I did the singer-songwriter challenge, that was not how I did it because the turnaround is so fast on those. I was writing just with my guitar. Totally different process for me. It just felt very different.
Guitar and vocal was a different process for you, or the CD part of it?
That versus the CD. So,
Okay.
because the singer-songwriter challenge songs are not on here. They're still in the waiting tank.
Why?
Just I had so many back songs I wanted to get out first. So that's where this one, it wasn't because I didn't like the other songs. I really do. But I had this weird thing where I didn't want to move on from these songs. I kind of felt like I'd be abandoning these songs if I didn't put them on an album somewhere first. So now I'm ready to move on. But when I write with just my guitar, I don't know. It was almost more lyrics first. But when I write from the production standpoint, it was definitely more music first.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because we have to start with a prompt on those singer-songwriter things. So it prompts you to start with kind of a verbal idea. I did find, though, the challenge with that was that the music started sounding a little bit the same all the time, even though the lyrics were not. But I don't know. I've been dabbling a lot and thinking a lot about that production versus performing kind of a paradigm a lot lately and how it's different.
So can people listen to your music online? Are they streaming? Victor says, is your music streaming?
Yeah, you can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, any of the channels, Amazon.
Just mail him $100 bill, Victor, and he'll tell you where to stream it.
That's right. Then I'll even send you a CD.
Yeah, signed.
That absolutely.
Yeah, Paul and I need those royalties rolling in from his CD.
Well, that was another change this year, wasn't it?
Yes, but before we talk about that, I want to talk about this production versus writing thing. So what's interesting about, so a lot of times I do music first, and a lot of times I'll do melody. I'll do music, then melody, then lyrics. So that's kind of my go-to. It does start to sound the same, but I also think some of the sameness is just a style that I have. You know how when you listen to certain artists, like when you hear Taylor Swift, she sounds like Taylor Swift. I think I sound like Chad Shank, and sometimes I get really sick of sounding like Chad Shank, and I'm like, oh, I need to break out of this. But if I write lyrics first, and this is funny because I teach lyric writing with Berkeley, so we focus on writing lyrics, but we focus on the fact that you can either write them first or you can write them to music. So, but when I write lyrics first, I can say more, and I think I have a deeper story, right? Like I think I can get deeper into a thought, but the songs are not as catchy because the melody is not there when I write lyrics first. And that's because of when I'm writing lyrics first, I'm not necessarily paying attention to rhythm. And what's so important to melody is rhythm. So what I should do is pay attention to the syllable patterns as I'm writing lyrics first, and write to a certain like syllabic pattern, and then the lyrics will fit a certain way to music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I come from a poetry background because I was a English teacher, creative writing teacher. So I think my words do fall into a rhythmic pattern, but they can tend to fall into the same rhythmic pattern too
Right.
often. Um, I find that when I produce first, my songs are more original because I throw in new instruments or I try a new drum pattern or I try something that throws me off of my regular pattern. It's easier to get out of the rut that way, I think, because you can force yourself off. When I start with just a guitar, you just naturally kind of default to certain rhythms and strum patterns and chords, and it's not quite as fresh sometimes.
Jeanette said she's been writing melody music lyrics, so that's her little
Melody,
creative chain.
cool.
Yeah.
So then I'm wondering, so then once you have a melody, then do you pull an instrument in and try to find the chords that fit that melody? I'm just wondering.
I'm assuming that's probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because that's kind of what I do with when I write with my guitar is I do have kind of a little bit of a melody in my head, how I think the word should go, but then I try all kinds of different chord patterns to see what will shake it up and sound fresh.
So I did one of these live streams with Craig Honeycutt, he has his YouTube channel, From Musician to Artist, which is a great YouTube channel for people who are he's based in Australia and he owns a professional recording studio, and he actually writes that way. He makes the melody first,
Okay.
like plucks it out in his DAW, and then he builds everything around it. Like, so it's melody, then he sort of builds the chords, builds the music, and then decides like, okay, well, what am I going to write about lyrically? And he writes some really great songs, and he's coached people to write some really great songs too.
So when you do your melodies, Chad, do you actually play them out on the keyboard and have them as a track in there so that you sing along to that keyboard?
Um, so I do it a couple of different ways. So one of the ways that I will do it is that way. So I'll play it out on a keyboard and then I'll have it as a separate track. And then I'll usually live with just listening to the melody for a few days until I get it to the point where it's memorized.
Hmm.
I don't have a strong melodic memory. Like some people, they could hear a complicated melody and they could like sing it right back. And that's not me. So like I need to like listen to it until it sort of becomes ingrained. So that's what I'll do is I'll just listen to my track and a melody, and until it gets to the point where I can almost hum it and then I can write to it. So it's almost like I'm writing a parody in some ways. You know how sometimes it's easy to write lyrics to an existing melody? That's what I'm doing with my own songs. So that's one way. The other way that I'll do it is I will do the mumble singing, where I'll sing along to the track and I'll just sing nonsense and then pick out the parts that are cool and then sort of put that together for a song.
I've done that too. And sometimes those are the best ones, right?
Well, that's, those courses that I've taken with like Ryan Tedder, Charlie Puth, Lewis Bell, like
Mhm.
every single one of them does melody before lyrics. And they've
Right.
written a lot more hits than we have. John Gilmore says he starts with the music.
Hmm.
He says has transitioned to lyrics first. He's been to open mics and find people tend to be long-winded and confusing. I fall asleep. Keep it interesting. Yeah. So that's the thing too, where that's what I mean by my own songs. If I write lyrics first, the melody doesn't have a shape to it. It just kind of, it's almost like I'm just reciting words over music, which isn't always as interesting. Victor has a question too. So, Paul, as a poet, how do you think about the difference between poems and lyrics? That's a good question.
It's a very good question. I mean, there are definitely a lot of similarities. The tools that you have in poetry are the same tools you have in songwriting. So all your different rhyming types, your meter, all those things are similar. But I find that you have to back off on the poetry a little bit when you're writing lyrics because it still has to be understandable to somebody who's listening to a song. Um, and I don't mean dumb it down or anything like that. You just have it's a little more concrete. It's a little bit more direct. I still use a lot of metaphor and things like that in my songs, but you have to be a little less poet and a little more storyteller maybe in songs. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
So you're saying a little bit more concrete than abstract concrete in songs?
Especially if you're doing like country music or folk music or something like that. Sometimes pop, I think you can find a little bit more of the metaphorical, figurative kind of a thing, but a little bit less of that. Because in poetry, sometimes you can be pretty abstract and pretty out there. Maybe a little less of that in songwriting. And in poetry, quite honestly, if you rhymed in poetry, it was like, you're doing old stuff, and you have to rhyme almost in songwriting. So it's a very different kind of a mindset too there.
Well, I think also poetry is really meant to be read, right? Whereas songwriting is meant to be sung. So there's a different relationship of poetry is never meant to be set to music, whereas lyrics, a lyric really isn't a song until it is set to music, right? If it's not set to music, it's basically a poem. But lyrics have a lot more repetition to them. They have a lot more like sections that have a very specific job, like verse, chorus, like those types of things, where poetry doesn't necessarily have that.
Although ironically, the first poetry was song. You know, back in Homer's day when they did the Iliad and the Odyssey, that was all sung.
John said he was in Nashville and went to the Bluebird and listened to Gary Burr. He said that the dumbest songs got him a car.
Yeah. I was listening to Martin Zeller. He performed at our local auditorium, and he hates the Zamboni song that he wrote. Oh. He says, I got to play it every time because it bought my place in Mexico.
Oh, yeah. The thing is, though, as writers, it's really easy to get caught up in our own sort of like bullshit, right? Like we're so trying so hard to be looked at as a serious writer that we try to like show off our chops.
I think so.
And the reality is that if it gets a reaction from people, or if people respond to it in some kind of way, positive or negative, that's all that it's really about, right? But the goal, I think, as writers is to try to be able to master what your listeners are going to feel. So I think that's where the craft comes in, is trying to have some control over how your listeners experience it. And, you know, music is sort of like food, where you have really fancy restaurants where it's very technical. The chefs are very like trained. And then you have like Taco Bell, right? Same 5 ingredients, 8,000 different versions of it. That's the difference between like certain genres of music, right? There's different parts of food, and it's not that one's better or worse than the other. Like, I love when people say like, well, pop music is dumb. Okay, well, you sit down and make a good pop song then. Have fun. Good luck. Most of the time, those people can't do it because it's not easy to be simple.
And I find that by performing in different places, you just know walking into a room, this is not the right song for this room, or this is the right song for this room. And sometimes I don't know, but I find out very quickly when I start playing it, you know, which ones connect. And sometimes the simplest ones are the ones that connect the most. And it's just sometimes blows me away. It's like, I didn't realize that was going to connect quite to that extent.
How do you know they're connecting?
They listen. Yeah, I mean, you can, especially in a bar or a cafe or a, you know,
prison.
You know. I mean, I haven't done that yet, but I'm working on it. If people stop and turn and stay engaged in what you're doing, you know. Or if they tip you, that's always a good sign too.
That's good. Yeah.
But otherwise, they might turn and listen and then turn away and carry on with what they were doing. And so maybe the initial sonic piece of that caught their attention, but it didn't hold them. Somebody said earlier in one of the comments that he goes to open mics and he gets bored. People are
Yeah.
long-winded, and I do find too that a lot of times the shorter songs go over better.
Right. So that's an interesting thing that you brought up, because that is actually what led me to want to start studying songwriting deeper, is because if you ever go watch someone, and especially if it's the same person doing an open mic, a lot of times they will do their own song and you get kind of bored with their own song, but then they play a cover
Mm.
and something happens that it's the same singer, they're playing the same place, same guitar, but something happens in the room with the cover song that it feels a lot different, and it attracts attention, and I always wanted to figure out why that is. And my theory on that is melody,
Mm.
because cover songs are very, in order to cover them, you have to know them. So you have to be able to reproduce them. A lot of times, singer songwriters, they don't sing their song the same every time they perform it, right? Like you're just kind of getting up there and it's like, shit, I'm just going to play the G chord and sing whatever feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that might work, but that's probably why your songs aren't connecting with people, right? Like I think melody is what first captures people, and then they pay attention to the lyrics. John says sometimes you can't play loud enough for people to hear you.
I do
Yeah.
hear you, John. I do hear you on that one.
And Jeanette said she's all about snappy little tunes. Melody grabs the ear. Yeah. I I've actually, it's funny because I mean I teach lyric writing, but I even tell my lyric students that one of the quickest ways that you can improve your songs in general is to focus on writing better melodies. Because most people don't have a problem coming up with interesting lyrical ideas, but studying melody is something that people should do.
Yeah, because if you have a good melody, you can sing your grocery list, right? I mean, you
Oh
would,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. So speaking of that, I actually have, and this was perfect timing. I didn't actually plan this, but in March, I'm doing a 2-day online melody writing retreat.
perfect.
So it's going to be a Saturday and Sunday, and it's going to be online, so people can attend from anywhere. But it's only $157 for both days. I'm going to tell you every single thing I know about writing melodies, and it's at homesongwritingcourses.com. So check that out if you want to join. And we've got a few people signed up already, but would love to have more. So what do
And
you think about that?
I'll give you a shout out because I've taken part in some of your classes and things. You are a fantastic teacher, Chad. And I've been a teacher for 35 years, so I know what a good teacher is, and you are one. So you're getting your money's worth if you do something like this.
Well, thank you. And that's a huge compliment coming from another teacher for sure, because yeah. But what do you think, Paul, about melody? Like what is your take on that, melody versus lyric? I mean, we talked about doing it different ways, but
Mm.
what's your gut feeling on that whole conversation?
I mean, I think they're like siblings, right? And they need to get along and work together to get the song really over the edge. But melody, I do think, is probably king or queen. I mean that's where you got to start. That's something that personally I have to always remind myself to do a better job with, because as like I said, as an English teacher and a poet, I immediately want to go to the lyrics, and when I get to those lyrics, I challenge myself to find a unique way to sing those that's catchy and hooky, so that, and it's got to be easy to sing too in some ways. If something is so complicated that you have to think about it so hard, it's got to roll a little bit. There's got to be something that feels right about how
Yep.
those words go with that melody.
So there's definitely, we were talking about structures and things earlier. There are definitely tools and techniques you can use with melody to build song sections. And there's a few, just like there's rhyme schemes, there's also like melody schemes. And there's different ways that you can put it all together to and it you can make a melody sound really interesting when it's not super interesting, right? It's all in how you put it together. Same with lyrics. Like you can say a lot without using big words. Yeah.
Or a lot of words, right? I
Or a
think
lot of words,
some of the
right?
best songs are the most compact songs. You say the most with the least.
John says you need to have it played about 50 times so you can learn it. Said Chad's right about not knowing your own songs. Yeah, I see people all the time. Or they start a song, like someone's going to show you a song and they'll be like, wait, and then they have to try to like sing it on. It's like, obviously you don't have it worked out. And if you don't know it, nobody else is going to remember it.
So how do you feel about cover songs that mess with, I don't know if they mess with the melody as much as they totally reinvent the style of the song. Like you do a country song in reggae, or you do a, a rap song in folk. How do you feel about that?
It depends on if it's good or not.
See, I really like it. Like somebody did Hey Ya, and they totally
Yeah.
stripped it back into just this acoustic guitar thing, and it was so cool. You still have the integrity of the original melody kind of there, but it totally transforms sometimes.
Well, I think that's what I mean is if it has the same melody as the original within a certain threshold, right? But the people who do a cover song and they completely change the melody, like that bugs me.
Like
It's
a
like
song.
that's not the same song anymore.
Well, I
Yeah.
heard a band which shall go unnamed where the lead singer did that to his own song, and he was a platinum artist, and people were walking out and leaving because it didn't sound like the
It's
song that they were expecting.
no, because songs become part of your experience, right? And I think you go to a concert to be in the presence of this person that connected with your life, right? Um, I think going to concerts of independent artists is different. I think you're going to experience someone's art, and I think you're going to experience like learning something or hearing something new. Whereas I think if you go to a concert of like REO Speedwagon, I just thought I'm thinking Def Leppard or REO Speedwagon, right? So like you go to them because you want to relive your youth or discover the ancient music that old people listen to if you're, in your teens right now.
I was gonna say, who you calling ancient, Chad?
No. Well, hey, I grew up in that era, so like we're not that far apart in age.
I know, I did too. No, but I do enjoy when an artist will strip down a song and do an acoustic version of it.
Victor says, "Hey." No, it's funny though, like Janet Jackson's on oldie stations now. Like think about that,
Yeah, I know.
you know?
Well, so is stuff from the 90s. Well, I guess Janet Jackson was 90s, wasn't she? I think of her as more
Yeah.
80s, but I guess she was
Well, she
90s.
was late 80s, like 90s, but or you'll hear like you'll hear like a song that was sort of like controversial when it came out and now it's on like the light station and it's like, "Oh man." What did John say here? Also doesn't like concerts where the artist invites audience participation on the chorus because he can't hit the notes. Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yep. Or they just stand up there and let the crowd sing the whole thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
let me hear ya. Let me hear ya. It's like, no, freaking sing your own damn song. Lip sync if you have to.
So we were talking before about the over obsession with perfection of sounds and stuff like that. I just read an article, and I know you're not the hugest Beatles fan, but it was
Right.
about the Beatles, and it was 10 major gaffes that appear in Beatles recordings. And I read the thing, and sure enough, they're there, but nobody cares because the
Right.
song is so dang good, you know?
And that's what this guy was saying about Billie Jean is like, do you really give a shit that the shaker is way too freaking loud? No, because it's
And you
still
know what? And everybody's making their shaker louder after that, too.
for a while they probably did. Now they don't. I-
Yeah.
if you listen to Billie Jean compared to like a modern mix, yeah, people would not mix that way now, but that song still will get people dancing when it comes on. And basically his point is like, who gives a shit about the mix if it moves people,
Yeah.
you know?
I was reading or listening to a deal about one of Prince's producers, and it was his first day on the job, and Prince threw him in there and said, "Record this." Well, he had all the levels way too hot, so things were clipping and feeding back. And Prince comes in and listens to it. Huh? You really pushed it on that, didn't you? I like it. Keep it. you know, you
Yeah.
just you just happy accidents, I guess. But
So this is getting really technical and probably put some songwriting people to sleep,
yeah,
but
it's not worry.
there's a type of EQ called a Pultec, which is a 1950s equalizer, and it's tube. It's made out of tubes like TVs used to be, but there is like a low frequency gain and a high frequency gain. That's it. Like there's no mids, there's nothing. It's just you have your highs and your lows. Well, they also have a high attenuate and a low attenuate. And in the manuals that came out in the 50s, it said do not turn up the gain and attenuate at the same time. Well, somebody discovered that when you turn both up at the same time, it actually clears out parts of the frequency range in the mids so you can get more bass without it like flooding the rest of your mix. So by sort of breaking the rules, people discovered that you can make this thing sound a lot better. And it's still one of the most coveted like EQs that tons of mixers and producers use. And they do that all the time where they use the gain and then they attenuate it at the same time because the circuitry does something to the frequency curve that sounds good.
So even if you don't understand any of that technical piece, you can break the rules if it
Right.
sounds good, right?
Right.
You make new rules.
Or make new rules. Absolutely.
Like I think "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd totally breaks the rules of song structure. It's just verse chorus. That's it. The whole song. Other
Yep.
than the little guitar hook, which is what kind of keeps you coming back. Turn it up to 11. There you go.
I watched a documentary on uh the people who made the Pink Floyd album cover.
Mm.
Is it Hypnosis? Hypnosis, Hipgnosis. I think that was the name of the design firm that did a ton of huge album covers. But the Pink Floyd Prism, they
Mm.
designed that. But they
Okay.
were talking about how one of the album covers, they just used a picture of a cow that had nothing to do with anything. And people were trying to say that it had some secret meaning. And like people were like writing these deep papers on like the meaning of this cow. And actually, they just wanted to be stupid and use a picture of a cow. Like there was no meaning to it, but people put meaning behind it. So it's like, it's art.
So let me ask you this, Chad. What do you see as like trends in songwriting that are kind of really hitting home now and like in the last year or so?
Um, I think what I'm seeing is that genres are becoming more niche.
Mm.
So like when you talk about country music, you're not talking about a genre. There's like a whole spectrum of country music. You have things that sound like, Hank Williams, like the first Hank Williams Sr. And then
Hmm.
you have everything to like bro country who has like super auto tune lyrics, right? And
Yeah.
there's things that are everywhere in between. So I think that is something. I also think that um, when you listen to songs, I think the fact that we live in a time where everybody has access to learn from the greats, I actually think a lot of genres are getting more lyrical. I think there's a lot of pop that's becoming very lyrical now. Country, some types of country are going less lyrical. Um, But overall, I think that there is a craving for songwriters.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Like, look at Taylor Swift. Um, like, people really are drawn to Taylor. I think, I mean, huge machine. I mean, whatever. But she didn't start there.
No.
But what she did well the whole time, and she will probably tell you this too, is she learned how to write songs. And I
Mm.
think at the core of it, if her songs were not as good as they are, she would not be who she is. So I think, you know, you hear that it all starts with a song. I
Mm.
think that's really true. I think if you need to have good songs, and I actually think in a lot of ways, songwriting is becoming better because people are able to study it and they are able to learn from each other more than any other time in history because we have YouTube, we have studio, we have Berkeley, we have, you know, at home songwriting. Um, we all learn from each other. And I think overall production, you know, people will, you know, poo poo on different special effects or different things that are in songs, but people are pushing the lines with the tools. And I think music is at a point where we all have the same tools. So you better use them really cool. Otherwise, you're not going to stand out. Right. Um, and John says single songwriters or collaborators. So if you look at the Music Row songwriting charts, there's more and more songs starting to come out that are by one writer. And I think there's going to be a pendulum swing back to one songwriter songs because I don't think having six people writing one song gives the same emotion as if one person wrote it. I think at the time you have six people working on it, you're manufacturing a song. You know what I mean? It's not one emotion, it's six people's emotion, which that's the Walmart version of songwriting. I
And
don't know.
maybe
I just said
maybe
a whole bunch of crap. Does that
because maybe
mean
that's why
anything?
collaboration is so hard. Collaboration is hard because it does get a little. It feels like it can easily get disjointed and go. You have to get all the people on that same track, and that's hard.
And you I think you have to get as much done in one session as you can, otherwise it will die.
Hmm. And I kind of, and I haven't done a ton of collaborating, but when I have, it feels like somebody needs to be the lead songwriter in the room.
Yeah.
Other people can like contribute ideas and help the generation of brainstorming and get the juices going, but somebody's got to be driving that boat.
So Victor says, why do we like songs? What do we get out of them?
A lot of parts of that. I mean, don't you think part of it is the hook, right? If there's a good hook, people like to hear something that's familiar, and that hook becomes that familiar, satisfying thing. Um, a universal message, something that connects. Although, ironically, the more specific you are, sometimes the more universal you are,
Yes.
connecting emotionally. I don't know. That's my thought. What do you think, Jed?
I think it's more philosophical than we want a hook. I think we are drawn to things that make us feel something
Yeah.
or they're associated with something else that's happening in our lives, right? And I theorize that this is why so many like older songwriters have such a reverence for the Beatles and Bob Dylan and like these people that like somebody like me, like I listen to the Beatles and I listen to Bob Dylan and I don't see it. Like I'll just be honest, I don't see it. But I think what other people are getting from that is they had other feelings that are happening in their life. So whatever you were into when you were like 10 or 11, that's your thing. Like I think like 9, 10, 11, that's when you really sort of get into the like things that make us because the music that I really like and I'm drawn to sound like the music that was out when I was 9, 10, or 11. And I wasn't 9, 10, or 11 when Bob Dylan or when the Beatles were around. So that's not my lens, right?
Mhm.
But when you think of people who are 10 years old now, or like people who are like, let's say they were 10 years ago, right? That was 2013. That was probably like Lady Gaga, right? So like a lot of times they're not experiencing, you would play them some of these other songs, and yes, the Beatles are still popular with young people. There's a lot of older music that's popular with young people. But I don't think that's what is ingrained like it is with like some of the other people, right? And I think there's this generation that has kind of grown up with like that as being the um sort of like holy grail of songwriting, right? Like Dylan and the Beatles. And like I don't see it. And that's the honest truth, is like I don't, like those songs do nothing for me. Although the cover that Adele does of Bob Dylan's song, like that's really good.
Mhm.
But what do I like about it? Probably the emotion in her voice, right? She can sing the hell out of it. I don't know. I'm just kind of mumbling now, but I
Well,
think
so I looked. You sent me a list of the biggest songwriters, and Zach Bryan was on there as number two. And I'll be
yeah,
honest, I'd never listened to a Zach Bryan song, so I went on and I pulled up his playlist. I like every single one of his songs,
yeah.
but it sounds like artists that I like. It sounds like Jason Isbell. He sounds like Bruce Springsteen. He sounds like Ryan Adams. I mean, he's got that storyteller, stripped down, gritty, authentic kind of a vibe going.
So Victor says, Chad, I feel like you're telling why we like some songs, but as a cultural thing, why do people like song?
Mm.
I think song is, I mean, going way back, I think song was a way of communication, right? Like I think people sang things to each other as a way to remember stories.
It did.
And like Paul, you said, poetry came from people singing to each other. But songs are something that we can do in groups. And humans are a tribal species, right? So I think at the core, music is something that hits us at the core of who we are. And it's a way that we can have mental and emotional organization. So humans are one of the few animals that can sense rhythm, right? Why do we sense rhythm? I think it's because that is how we connect with other people. So, like, if you start banging on a log, right? If we're out by a fire and you start banging on a log, like all of a sudden someone else could join in, and all of a sudden you have music. And I think there's something at our core, and that's why concerts are fun for us, because we're all singing the same song at the same exact time and having this like tribal experience. So I think what song does for us is it hits the part of our brain that goes to rhythm, right? I
Did you
don't know.
did you say the last comment? I love it. Speech and emotional prosody.
Yeah.
That's kind of profound. I like that.
We're getting deep on this.
I know we need our neuroscience.
Um, but
I
I
mean,
think
just on
music,
a basic level, I used to always say that music was words amplified because you have another means to amplify that message besides just the words. But that's maybe not the answer that to this question, but I think that's
but
something.
think back, like going way back before they invented pianos, right? Like it was said that the only instrument that should be in church is the human voice. So a lot of choral music started because people said the voice should be the only instrument. Well, then they added organs, and then some rebel came along and invented the goddamn piano. And then that was like, ooh, piano's evil. It should never be in church, right? Now all of a sudden, every freaking church has a piano.
And
Big
a
surprise.
guitar, no less.
Churches now have freaking fog machines and concert lighting. Let's get real.
They do.
Like, Jesus is a rock star. Um, it says, I think it's not a coincidence that many great singers and songwriters came out of church. Right. Because I think So this is getting really philosophical in how I think, but I think God, whatever you see God as, I happen to not like I'm not a Christian, so I don't believe in that part of it. But I believe in something. And I think something created everything. And as songwriters and as singers, the way that you honor your creator is by creating. And I think when people say that we are the combination of God and animal, that we have the ability to create. And I think when we create, we honor whatever created us.
That is
Or
pretty
we,
cool, Chad.
I know.
No, I thank you for sharing that.
Victor says Harry Thunderance or Cosmic Muffin.
That sounds like a
Better than,
band name.
yeah. Jeanette says Elton John wrote hymn-like tunes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, that's where they learned music, right? Like, if you weren't doing music in school, you were probably getting at church.
And poetry. I mean, Emily Dickinson, all of her poems were written in the meter of the church hymns. That's what she knew. So she wrote them all as church hymns.
Yeah. John says the song needs to tell a story that's universal to the human spirit. The brain processes lyrics in a different place than the rhythm, and then they're integrated in a higher space. Absolutely, and I think that's where the concept of melody being so important comes in. Is I think what I've heard somebody say is lyrics are for the head and music is for the heart, because we feel music and we hear lyrics, which is kind of a cool way to think about it too.
Yeah, because you can have people who love a song and really don't know the lyrics at all, but they love the song.
You know what's really funny is, do you know the words to "Wanna Be Startin' Something" by Michael Jackson?
I know that part. Want to be starting something, but I don't know the rest of it.
I wanna pull this up because this is so funny. Because how many years have we heard this song? And I thought somebody was joking when they said this. I need to pull this up and show you these lyrics, because we all know that it's too high to get over, yeah, yeah, too low to get under, yeah, yeah.
Lulu. Yeah, there's a good example, John.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to share my screen. How do I do this? I want to be starting something lyrics. Okay. Can you guys all see this?
Yep.
The one part literally says, "You're a vegetable. You're a vegetable. Still they hate you. You're a vegetable. You're just a buffet. You're a vegetable. They eat off of you. You're a vegetable. Ow." Did you know that it said that? You're a vegetable. You're a vegetable.
I thought it was like you're invincible.
That's what I thought it said. But he's saying you're a vegetable.
Well, there you go. Melody rules at the top, Chad. Doesn't even matter what you say.
Yep. Yeah. Like if someone showed you these lyrics, you'd be like, were you high when you wrote those? Like, if I just showed you that, Paul, you would have never thought Michael Jackson sings, "You're a vegetable, you're just a buffet." Like, I don't see Michael Jackson ever using the word buffet.
Yeah, I don't know.
John says, apparently we need no lyric help. But see, that's the thing. Every song uses some combination of elements, right? So there's some combination of lyrics, melody, chords, and groove. I would say that "Wanna Be Starting Something" is groove, melody, and chords. Lyrics, we don't care, right? Because we move to it. Now, other songs, like a Jason Isbell song, the star of the show is the lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
right? But Jason Isbell still has catchy little melodies that carry the
Mm-hmm.
lyric, and I think that's what makes them work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, let's see what Victor said here. I love the song "You Get What You Give" as a positive, uplifting song until I finally listen to the lyrics. I don't know what the lyrics are, but I'm apparently not positive and uplifting. But like the song 99 Luftballons.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, what do we get out of music? We get something that tickles our brains, right? And it may tickle our brain in a different way at different times. Like, have you ever had a song, Paul, where you've heard it a million times, but then you have something happen in your life and all of a sudden the lyric like fully applies to what's happening and you totally hear it in a different way?
Yeah, sometimes it's if that song it happens during an emotional time, sometimes that connection can be made too.
Yeah.
But I think people said it over in the comments. The word emotion is pretty fundamental in a lot of why we like music. I mean, it can be emotion for the groove, like you said, because it does something to your body physically,
Yeah.
or it can be the lyrics, even if it's mental, but there's something about those lyrics that hit you on that purely emotional level that connect with you. Because there's a saying that the things that you remember in life are the things that hit you emotionally. If it didn't hit you emotionally, you won't remember it. So if you think about your memories just in your personal life, I just spent the afternoon interviewing my parents because I want to write their history. Well, the things that they remembered that they could tell me back as stories are the things that connected with them personally in their lives and hit them in that emotional place that really resonated over time, right?
I know that you're putting this together to create like a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you told me this before we came on, which I think is a super cool idea. Um, but that just gave me the idea of what if you interviewed someone to make an album?
I know, right? I thought about actually, what if I wrote an album about my parents' lives? You know,
Yes.
I know it could be pretty cool.
Did
Concept
you
album.
do you ever listen to Alec Benjamin?
I don't know who that is.
Um, you should look him up because he does pop music, but it's not lyrically, it's not normal pop music. And he write like his new song is I sent my or I sent my ther or my something along the lines of I made my therapist need a therapist. That's the that's the topic of the song that he's so like pulled up or he's so messed up. I was gonna say pull up this comment from Victor, but Alec Benjamin writes about like really interesting things that happen in his life or like people's lives, and it's like a pop song, but it's in more of like a story, kind of more I would say more of it's not even country. It's probably even more like of a folk sort of origination, but it still works with the pop production and stuff like that. But um, I think the world needs more different things that are not just saying the same crap over and over again, right? Like I think there's a lot of songwriters that are now I don't want to poo-poo on imitation because I think imitation is the best way to learn. Like I think imitate the people that you really admire and the styles that you like. But at some point, I think you need to break away and sort of find your own thing. And I think I would much rather hear someone write a very honest and sort of odd song at this point rather than the same old crap. Does that make sense? Like write about things that are and like I'm doing this series on the YouTube channel about writing a song 10-minute chunks. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like up to like 9 or 10 episodes now. Um but somebody commented like no one would ever say one of the title. No one would ever use my title in a song. And the title of the song is Oopses and Mistakes. And he's like, unless you're writing for a 4-year-old. And I'm like, the fact that no one has ever said oopses and mistakes in a song ever and you say that no one would use it, that makes me want to use it more, right? Like,
Right.
why
Well,
do
you
you want to?
know, one of my main mantras in my creative writing class: make the ordinary extraordinary. everybody has similar experiences in their lives, but how can you make that an extraordinary story? How can you amplify that in a way that's never been done before? You know, a unique spin on it, a unique take on it. I totally think that's valid.
Victor asked in the chat if it's Alex Benjamin. It's Alec, A-L-E-C. I put it on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, check out his songs. They're good. They're really good. Let's see what someone else is saying here too. Wally says Elton John's Ticking is all about the lyrics. Every word is easily understandable and upfront in the mix. Very emotional song. The lyrics are everything. Right. And I think that's the key too, is like you can sort of do both at different times, right? Like you don't have to be, well, I'm a lyrical songwriter. I only focus on the lyrics. Well, why don't you have fun and just write a dance song? Like you might have fun with it. Let's see what.
Kind of interesting that the country song of the year was Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, huh?
Yeah. Victor says, Chad, I gather from what you said about religion music, that's one of the things we like about both is that they help us feel less alone. Mm. Absolutely. And I think religion is a way for people to make sense of things that don't make sense. And songs are a lot of times ways that we make sense of things that don't make sense. Tracy Chapman. Yes. I love that Luke Combs did that song.
And he did a great job too.
Fantastic. He did because he didn't really change much.
No, it's the only thing he did is he dropped it a half a step.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's basically almost note for note.
That made her the first ever Black female to have a solo written #1 country song.
Yeah, I saw that. Pretty cool.
Which people are like, yeah, but that song's 40 years old. In today's political climate, the fact that a female Black songwriter got her song to be a #1 country song is significant. It's significant in the fact that it took this long, and it's also significant in the fact that it happened. Do you know what I mean? And I think people are going to, like I said, the pendulum always swings. We always go, everything goes back and forth, right? I think the solo writer is going to come back. Mm-hmm. I hope so, because I'm 100%er most of the time. Yeah. I write with very few people. Paul is one of them.
The other thing that is cool is that song resonated with Tracy Chapman's original audience, mm-hmm. and it's resonating just as powerfully with probably a totally different audience. Now, there's some universal songwriting there. I mean, to write a song that can resonate with that wide range of audience, that's the tale of a really good song. And it's simple song. I mean, musically, it's super simple. It's the same 4 chords the entire time.
Talking about structure, it basically has a couple of variations within a couple of different sections, but it's really just the sections. It's really just the sections kind of alternating a little bit. It's not verse chorus. It's not like, it's a well-written song that, for the people who like to break the rules, that's a song that breaks a lot of rules, even though there are no rules, but that one just works. Yeah.
And that guitar hook is so simple.
Yeah.
It just pulls that whole thing together. Because there's really 2 different, there's the verses, and then I think they call it the chorus. It's that other part, but just those 2 parts throughout the whole song. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And it uses an interesting mix of metaphor and specific concrete language as well. And I think when we talk about being specific to make it more universal, that is a song that's very specific, and it makes it hugely universal.
Yeah.
I mean, for those of us who were around when that song first came out, they overplayed it and I got really sick of it, but it was nice to hear it again. Now, Both versions. I like his version and I like the original version too.
Yeah.
So I have the Billboard where I got that list of songwriters from. They had an article in here that a lot of pop artists are writing self-deprecating songs. So they're writing songs like Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero, where she's basically saying like, she's the problem, I'm the problem. You have a lot of other artists that are writing songs about sort of their faults and things that are, writing about depression and writing about using antidepressants and like all of these things. And apparently that was enough for Billboard to notice that that was a trend, which I thought was interesting. It kind of is. Like I've noticed that too, where people are very honest and they're writing very real kind of like emotional type stuff. Younger artists, I don't know if it resonates with where I am in my life, but obviously it resonates with, younger people. But the Hot 100 songwriters, so the top 10, number 1, Taylor Swift. So not a surprise there. Number 2, Zach Bryan, which we talked about. Really good songwriter. Number 3, Jack Antonoff. Are you a fan of Jack Antonoff?
Yeah, everything I've seen of it, he's fun. And he was redoing the Taylor Swift stuff. He works with Taylor the first time.
He's done a lot of the original stuff and then redid it.
It was interesting him talking about trying to remember what he did the first time. And it's like he did just so many little one-off things where he took a little thing in the studio and made a little sound effect, and then he had to try to produce all that stuff.
But he works with like Lana Del Rey. He does the 1975. He's worked with Pink. He has his own side project, the Bleachers, or Bleachers. It's not I think it's just Bleachers. Number 4, Ashley Gorley, who is probably one of the most successful country writers ever. He has the most number 1 country songs. Number 5, SZA. If you are not familiar with SZA, she is an R&B singer-songwriter. Awesome that there is a female Black songwriter in the top 5. Number 6, Charlie Handsome. I don't know who that is. I don't know who Charlie Handsome is.
Yeah, I looked him up and I didn't know any of the songs, but
if anybody,
he does a lot of collaborations with other people, it seems like.
Oh, he works with Morgan Wallen, Post Malone, Drake, The Weeknd.
Really? That's interesting that Morgan Wallen is in that list, because it seems like an interesting blend there.
Well, Morgan Wallen is that cross of like bro hip hop country and country. Number 7, Tracy Chapman. Number 8 is Morgan Wallen. I actually don't care for him because of things that he's said, which we won't go into. Rob Bissell. I don't know who that is.
I don't know.
And then Peso Pluma, who is a Mexican pop artist who is gigantic across everywhere except for the United States. Like seriously, like breaking records all over the place. And the music is very traditional Mexican. So it's like when I hear it, it reminds me of going to a Mexican restaurant and eating chips and salsa. Like I always want to eat chips and salsa when I hear Peso Pluma. But yeah, those are the top 10 songwriters according to Billboard. And I would say that that's probably based on sales, right?
Yeah, I wonder. I would think so. Well, Taylor Swift kind of rewrote the whole book on record sale or music sales, concert sales.
In this magazine, they said if Taylor Swift was a genre, she would be the 9th biggest genre of music. Her music alone is larger and does more business than the entire genre of jazz.
And I saw some article where her earnings this year were bigger than like 50 country economies or something crazy like that.
Yeah. After you told me that, I saw that on MSNBC. They were talking about like her earnings are bigger than like country's like gross domestic product, the GDP. Like
Exactly. Exactly.
she does more business than entire countries at this point.
Crazy. It's quite an impact.
So what's interesting though is, and I thought about this as we are talking about Billboard and stuff, like the reason that I started at home songwriting though is not to teach people like I'm going to teach you how to write a hit, or I'm going to like teach you how to make all this money with your music and all of this stuff, right? Like I started at home songwriting because I wanted to have a place where people who just love the craft go and like learn to write better. And that doesn't mean write like everybody else. That just means better at whatever you do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like when I talk about like who's the top songwriter and who's all of these things, I personally think it's interesting because in some ways it's like, yes, that's the commercial side of the craft, right? Like that's where the money, where people make money, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money from it. But the reality is if you don't live in Nashville, if you don't live in LA, if you don't live somewhere where you can literally connect with those people, chances of getting discovered online, while possible, are probably less than getting struck by lightning, right? Like, so when the people are selling you these things and saying like, do this and you'll get 10 million fans or you'll make 100K off of your music, like that's not what I want to do, right? Like I don't want to teach you how to promote yourself, because my theory is a lot of people out there are not ready to be putting out their music. Just because you can swing a tennis racket doesn't mean you're Serena Williams, right? Like I could go buy a basketball, but that doesn't make me Michael Jordan. So there's a lot of people out there that write one song and their family loves it. Oh my God, you need to go to Nashville. You should do this for a living. You wrote one shitty song. Do you know what I mean? And my goal is to help that person understand how to write more songs that get better, to get to the point where you actually should be marketing it. Because until you have a song that actually moves people, you're just going to be throwing your money away on the marketing side of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
And
sense? So it's like I don't
you
want my
can't be afraid to get feedback about those songs that you're writing, those crappy ones even, because
yeah.
that's the only way you're going to know if you're getting better. And that's why I like playing mine out at open mics or whatever. It's that authentic audience so I can learn.
It says over 100,000 new songs uploaded every day. You have no chance. But John says, do help us get better. To be honest, like I have seen the people who attend like the workshops and the people that I connect with. I feel like over this year, like everybody has gotten better
Mm,
because we're learning together. And
mm-hmm.
Victor says, yes, that's why he joined the group. Awesome. And to me, like having those connections with people like Paul, Victor, Jeanette, Wally, John, whoever else is watching that's not been commenting, like these connections for me are definitely feel better than getting some royalty check or something. You know what I mean? Like now I haven't gotten a royalty check that could buy a house. So I mean, put it into perspective, but but I guess what I'm saying is like I think it's fun to see what resonates with a large number of people, because if you really do have the goal of wanting to be a songwriter and you really do have the goal of like I want to make this my career, you probably are not going to get there by being off the wall, like just totally breaking every single rule at first, right? Like you have to sort of learn the game a little bit. So then you know what rules you're actually breaking. And I think way too many people get overly confident early when they should be focusing on getting the quality better. Does that make sense? And I say this because when I was in my 20s, I was the other way. I was like, I'm the shit, right? Like I'm going to put stuff out. I'm going to be, artists I was working with were going to be famous and I was going to be famous. I'm going to have this big studio and like all of these things. And when I look back now, it's like, I wish I would have known then what I know now, because things maybe would have been different, but you can't have regrets, right? So my goal this year and heading into next year is I really want to continue the education piece to make people get better. What's Victor saying here? I just want to make the musical equivalent of ships in a bottle. They may not sail, but they're fun to make. Awesome.
You need to write that song, Victor. That's a song.
That's totally a song.
I think so. But really, I mean, why do you songwrite, Chad?
I mean, it's who I am.
Yeah. It is the thing that I do that makes me lose track of time. When I'm writing a song, when I'm doing that, it's like I am in my own little world. 4 hours can zip by in 2 seconds. That's that flow state that people talk about.
Yep.
I love it. That it's like that adrenaline rush, even if nobody ever hears it.
Totally. I mean, that's with me too. Like, I mean, even doing this type of stuff, like we've been going almost an hour and a half already. And like it doesn't feel like that long. It feels like we just started doing this,
It
and
goes back.
my chair's dropping.
You're drinking, Chad. It goes back to that people connection too. It is so fun to be with a group of songwriters and talk songwriting, to share songs, to share ideas. That's a fulfilling thing. It's that human connection.
What I love teaching is to see people have like the aha moment, like to have that instance of like, oh, now I get it, or now I'm going to write something that like is that one step further than they were. You know what I mean? And Paul, you've been in the meetings for a while, as I'm getting a tickle, but you've seen growth, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. You get a little bit better every day, and you have to do it to get better. It's like my wife, I always just tell her middle schooler, she's a teacher too. Your brain's a muscle, and if you don't exercise it, you're not going to get stronger. It's just like songwriting. You have to do it. You have to keep trying. You have to get better. Like doing these songwriting challenges this year, writing so many songs in 1 year, I got better because I did it, and you have to do it to learn it. And the more you do it, the more you learn.
Don't you think that you also don't learn just how to do it, but you learn how not to do it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, I keep coming back to this performance thing, but people tend not to want to listen to long solos anymore. In general, there are exceptions. The bridge has kind of become the solo, in a lot of these songs. The 4-minute song has become a 3-minute song or a 2-minute and 30-second song. It's just kind of the new formula, and it works.
But I still think that's something that would change with time too.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But just this year, that seemed to feel like the thing.
So here's the things that I wrote down that I said that I learned this year as I'm losing my voice for some ungodly reason. I wrote, like, what I learned is that you should find what feels right and do it. Also, something that I've learned is everyone has an artistic vision, and those visions are different. So what I've learned by working with everybody is that there's so many ways that people want to write songs, and there's so many reasons why they want to write. There's so many things that people want to write, and it's all valid, right? Like I used to be kind of like, why would you, this is in my younger days, this is not now, but I used to think, why would you write a song if you didn't want to write it more commercial? Right? But now it's like everybody has a vision. Sometimes that's commercial, sometimes it's not, which is totally fine. I also wrote down the joy is in the process.
Mm.
I think that when you talk about flow state, it's not about the song that you enjoy. I mean, I do enjoy listening when I'm done, but for me, it is getting lost for hours and just doing it. I also wrote that teaching helps me learn, and it also helps me see other people's perspectives. So those are the things that I learned this year.
It's a good list. I had a
John
list
said,
too.
John
No,
said
go.
33. John said 33-minute drum solos are back. Yes. Yeah, let's do it.
What did I write down? I wrote, the more I wrote, the better I got. I did find that sometimes when I wrote really quickly and tried not to filter my thoughts, I got a more cohesive, original message. And obviously, you got to go back and tweak it. But if I could get the core of it out in a burst, and you have to bypass that left side or that left side of your analytical brain and get to the right side and make some of those connections that you don't even know you're making because you're moving quickly. I found that adding a new instrument could add new inspiration, kind of break me out of a rut. I thought having a songwriting community was really powerful, and having an authentic audience where you knew you were going to share what you created, it just makes everything real. Keep it short. That's been my mantra this year. I had an interesting conversation with Sarah Morris, songwriter that you've had on the show.
Yeah.
And we were talking about gigging, and we decided you can either play cover songs for money or originals for exposure. So how are you going to get paid with money or exposure?
Right.
You know, and then some technical things. I did not know this term, diamonds. The producer guy was saying a diamond in session music is an extended note at the end of a section, like where people would just strum a chord and let it ring out. They call that a diamond. So I learned that.
Interesting. I've never heard that.
I hadn't either, and schlang. You schlang. Schlang. That's what
I thought you were going to say another schla word.
No.
Schla.
No.
Okay.
No. So this
Some
was
people
all
learn
over.
that.
I know, this is in my class.
You know what? You know what's really interesting? Something that you just said that was what reminded me of the song challenges. You said that, and this could be the Facebook group challenges, which for those of you who are not familiar with the Facebook group, it's the singer-songwriter challenge site page on Facebook. Every week they give a prompt and then people write a song. It's starting Sunday, right? This Sunday.
Yeah.
For like 10 weeks. But also the songwriting challenges that I do, I've never thought about it, but we are giving each other an audience. So you actually are writing something that you know someone is going to hear. It's not just something that you're just writing to write. You're actually writing to have someone hear it, which I think is awesome. Wally says he discovered a lot since the last song challenge. He's still been tweaking his song and making improvements until he gets it to an acceptable level. That's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. John had quite a list there.
Yeah. So John said he did open mics, wrote 50 songs. Awesome. It's like a song a week. Built 3 guitars, clarified songwriting goals. Lots of work in Pro Tools. Added more emotion to performance, learned to listen better and evaluate critically, and got braver. Yeah, well, John,
like
you
do a
do
career of growth right there. Holy smokes!
Yeah. Awesome. And John, for those of you who don't know John, John, you do a good job of writing and also producing the songs that you have shared with us. So nice work. What are some other things that you all have learned or done this year? Put it in the chat. Like, what are some things that you've learned about creativity, about songwriting, about yourself? Like, I think it's interesting because I'm not a big like New Year's resolution person, but the older that I get, I think it's good to stop and reflect and sort of get a sense of where you came from and where you are. And then sort of think like, well, what are some things I'd want to, sort of focus on going forward? But I'm not one of those people that sets a resolution. Does that make sense? Like, my resolution is more of, it's not a SMART goal. It's not usually measurable. It's not, sometimes not realistic. But I always tell people, like, people say, well, what's your 5-year plan? And it's like, well, I don't know. 5 years ago, I didn't know that I'd be doing a live stream and teaching for Berkeley. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was not on the bucket list.
Yeah. No, I love the reflection thing. I think you have to reflect to grow, right? I don't mind not making a specific goal either, because then you can't break it. And you can adapt. And if you only, I mean, seriously though, on the serious side, if you only subject yourself to a goal on the first of the year, where does that leave you the other 365 days, or 64 days? I think
Right.
we make micro goals all the time. Every time I create a song, I want it to be the best song that I've created. And that's not always going to happen, but I try to get better incrementally every time. And then if I know something didn't work on this one, I'll try to make that a goal for the next one. Let me try to make that better. You can have lots of goals.
Yeah.
But reflection is key. I'm totally with you on that.
And I have come to the conclusion that my goal is to be happy and not as stressed, right? So whatever gets me there is what I should focus on, kind of a thing.
Sure.
And the Buddhists would tell you, no expectations, no disappointment, right?
Is that what the Buddhists say?
Well, the Buddhists are more like, you're going to suffer, so just learn to deal with it and try to be cool within the suffering. But also they talk about not being attached. And I think sometimes when we have goals, we get attached and we get disappointed when we don't meet them. So you can avoid disappointment by not attaching yourself to a goal. But
a goal is not a promise.
That sounds like a teacher saying right there.
I don't, maybe. Goal, you got to have a goal though, right? You got to have something to shoot for. Otherwise where are you going?
What's your goal for 2024?
I want to, so I did the songwriter challenge for the first time last year. I really want to do that again. So that means 20 more songs for sure. My musical duo, the Sundogs, we're trying to put an album together. I want to get out there and I want to play them live. Those are some of my goals. I want to keep learning. I want to finish these classes that I'm taking through studio and get better. I want to learn how to use some of my plugins, because you and I have talked many times. We have way too many plugins. I don't even know how to use them all. They just sit there. So I want to use what I've got a little bit, not get out of the trap of I just want more. No, I want to use what I have better. So those are
the more that so lately I've been on this kick of studying mixing, because I've studied the crap out of songwriting. Like,
right.
I mean, my whole life is talking songwriting, basically. So like sometimes I actually get sick of talking about songwriting. But with mixing, like I have every plugin under the sun. And a lot of stuff that I've been learning lately is it really comes down to like a few basic things. And every plugin under the sun does some combination of like 3 or 4 basic things. and some of them have a different sound or they have a different color. So it's almost like you can use a different sort of filter for things, but they basically do the same function. Um, and I was watching a video with Manny Marroquin. He's a hit song mixer. That's a whole nother art in itself. Everybody, like, you have producers, you have mixers, you have mastering engineers, you have songwriters, artists. Yeah, everything is its own art, and people like me try to do it all. But because I don't have money to hire other people to do it, that's the reality, right? So, but Manny had said with plugins, he said you should take 2 plugins every week and just use the crap out of them and learn exactly what they do, how they sound, how does it make the sound feel. And every week you pick 2 other ones, and eventually you start to know what your palette looks like. So like, oh, well, I want a grittier, wide sound on my drums. So I know that I'm going to use, the XYZ plugin because that's going to add some saturation and it's going to add some stereo spread, but not too much. You know what I mean? So how it colors everything. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's a really good idea, because I just fall for the emails that I get and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Then I spend more money.
I saw an interesting article today, actually. It said one of the trends in music production right now are plugins that are simpler, that have just 1 or 2 knobs, so that people don't have to think so hard when they're doing it.
Yep.
And there's some freedom in that. Like, I don't want to get too geeky on plugins, but there's it's a vocal plugin, CLA vocal.
CLA vocals. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's super simple. There's just 5 little dials. That's all I use on my vocals now a lot of times, because then I don't get so obsessed with that side of it. I just throw on some compression to get the reverb about right, and then I move on to the songwriting. And sometimes those have been my best mixes, where I don't obsess and over pile so many things on top of it, thinking that 17 plugins will make my voice sound better or something.
Yeah, one of the mixers I've been paying attention to calls that the plugin death spiral.
Sure.
Where it's like you're adding plugins to fix the crap that the first one did. Like, you just keep like, it's almost like this was probably why I'd be a bad hairdresser, but like, you cut more because you kind of mess it up, and then you have to keep cutting more, and then all of a sudden it's like the person's hair is all lopped off. You know what I mean? It's like, a good hairstylist knows where to cut and where not to cut. And I think that's, when it comes to music, that's what every part of the process looks like. And I think that's why I like to break down some of these tools in songwriting, is because if you know your options, you know what you don't have to do. Like, I'm doing a whole workshop coming up on January 6th about rhyming, and it's all about how you can use rhyme as a tool instead of just rhyming because you think you have to. And I think, have you ever stopped to think, why do songs rhyme?
It's a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
They just know that songs we've heard rhyme, so that means my song should rhyme. But that doesn't mean it's not rhyme or not rhyme. That's not your choice. It's like, you have the ability to use rhyme to communicate and amplify your message. So that's what the whole workshop on January 6th is going to be about, is why do we use rhyme? What is its function? What does it do? How can you learn it so you use it purposefully instead of just A, B, A, B, right? Because how many, or couplets, what impact emotionally does writing in couplets have versus writing A, B, A, B? There's actually a big difference, and we'll talk about things like that. So that'll be fun.
You're going to make the toolbox bigger, Chad. It's good.
It's the tools, yes.
But not plugins.
But it's kind of like plugins, because you have certain aspects to rhyme that you can throw in your songwriting mix, right?
Somebody's saying that They keep working until it sounds good.
Hours and hours, yeah.
It can be.
Sometimes, though, it's good to give yourself distance.
Yeah.
Because if you get so far in it, like you sort of lose the focus. And I think, Paul, you said something about some of your best songs are the ones that you got done quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is because, well, you have more experience, right? So you have sort of this subconscious ability, which I think comes from writing more. But I do think the quicker you get it out, sometimes the better, because you are still within that same emotion. Whereas if you take too long, you sort of lose the spark.
So otherwise it becomes like a house that's been added on to 6 times, rather
Right.
than a house with a single vision.
I also think not every song is meant to be rewritten. Some songs are just turds.
Yeah.
Like, not every song's gonna fly, right? And that's what I think sometimes with mixing too. Like, sometimes you're just putting glitter on a turd.
That's a t-shirt or something there, Chad. Chad's holiday t-shirt collection.
Yeah.
Glitter on
Well,
the
so Chuck Thomas. A lot of people know Chuck Thomas. He's
Yep.
part of At Home Songwriting. Chuck is a really good songwriter, but he and I disagree on, he doesn't believe in writing a lot of songs to get better. He thinks you get better by focusing on individual songs. And his thought is like, why would you not want that song to be the best song? And it's like, well, writing more doesn't mean you don't want them to be good. It just means you're getting more practice, right? Like,
Well, it's a little bit like brainstorming, right? If the more ideas you brainstorm, the more you have to draw upon to move forward. Every song
right.
is a learning experience for me. So the more songs I write, the more learning experiences I have, and the better I get. Because inevitably, something will not please me about almost every song I write, and something will please me. Every song does at least something well, and every song does something that I feel like could be better. But I learn from both of those things. So the more times I
Yeah.
do it, the more I learn on both ends. That's my opinion. Sorry, Chuck.
No. And but we go back and forth. And I think John did a super chat. He gave us $20. Thank you, John.
Oh,
That's
analyze.
that's my first super chat. Amazing. Thank you. Here's a question. Curious if a dog can affect creativity. Having trouble finishing a song right now because I hate dealing with the computer.
Yes, my opinion. Like I like this production class that I'm taking right now, and I've seen this with other songwriters too. They have their session template all set up, so when they're writing their song, they don't have to be fiddling with all their inserts. They kind of have a preset like vocal chain, so they can just jump to that. And they don't have to be tweaking with all the technical stuff, and they can let the creative thing kind of go. I haven't gotten myself disciplined enough to have a template like that, but I can see where it's definitely advantageous.
So, yeah, I mean, I think anything that you use could hinder the creative process. Like, I think within a DAW, if it is slowing you down, I think the key would be to think about, how is it slowing you down, right? Like, are you too concerned about actually capturing the song, or are you leaning on the DAW to be the instruments, or like, are you playing your own instruments? I think that makes a big difference. Like, if I had to write a song on a guitar, that would take years because I don't know how to play guitar, right? Like, I would have to fumble through chords. I'd have to do that. So I think whatever your technology is, whether it's computerized, or even some people might not even like writing in a notebook, right? Like, maybe they'd rather type. I think figuring out what works for you, I think is good. Chris says he's thinking about getting a digital recorder. Yeah, absolutely. Something that captures the music. You know what's funny, Paul? I thought about ordering a cassette recorder
Mm,
to record cassettes while I'm working in the computer and when I'm just ad-libbing and singing, because sometimes I do need ideas that I forget. And I thought it'd be cool to have cassettes of sessions that I could go back to and like take stuff from.
mm.
And my thought was, if the song sounds good coming from a shitty cassette recorder, it would sound good coming through something else, right? So I've actually thought about that. But phones, you can record on your phone now.
For sure. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, okay, I keep talking about this production class just because that's what's on my mind.
Yeah.
So this guy had a Canadian singer come down and they wrote a song together. And basically, she just recorded it in one take on her phone. He took that clip and put that into his DAW as a reference track. And then to build the demo for it, he basically just reconstructed all the parts to be in line with that. So the only thing that he got other than that first track is she did sing him a clean vocal track. But then,
Hmm.
so he had the template of the song on that original phone recording. That's all it was. He chopped it a little bit to get it to line up with a click so that it was actually on the beat. But then he started rebuilding it. So he'd go down and he'd put in some basic drum beats. He'd put in some keys. He'd put in a bass line, all to line up with that original track. So like the creative process for the songwriting was kind of done in a sense. And then it just became a production
Yeah.
task. It's kind of interesting.
I've heard of some songwriters where like maybe one person is a producer and maybe there's a couple of other like lyricists and maybe a musician, where they'll be the lyricist and the musician will be like playing in the back of the room, and then the producer sort of like producing as they go, and they sort of work in like this sort of production line sort of style where everybody has their own thing. You have like a top liner, you have somebody who plays an instrument, and then you have like a producer, and then everybody is contributing to that song. um yeah, John makes a good point too. Like sometimes recording, like you can practice a song and do it perfect, and then the second you hit that record button, like mentally you're just like the pressure's on and you like the groove is gone.
It's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun, Paul. I think we've been going for a couple hours here, so we'll probably wrap things up. But Paul, I just want to say thanks for being a part of At Home Songwriting and being on this, and just being able to text you music stuff constantly. I think one day I texted you all day long,
I
which
could
is
be.
fun.
Yeah, I think
But
that's pretty true. And I texted back.
yes.
No, and
Um,
thank you for all your leadership with this too. These are fantastic, and you're helping to build a community and bringing all these fabulous people together. I love watching the chat and seeing the insights people have. Community is so important, and this is one of them. Cool.
Absolutely. And thanks for everybody who is watching. We've had a good number watching now, but yeah, check out Paul's music, Paul Backermann, stream it online. And then don't forget, coming up January 6th is the At Home Songwriting. It's the first workshop of the new year. And 1 week from tonight, I'm actually going to be doing a live stream with Joseph from Songwriter Theory. So we're going to be live doing this again next Thursday on January 4th. So yeah. One final thing for Chris. Wally says, Chris, write everything down that you learned in your DAW. You'll be repeating it again. He uses Reaper, and they have a support group via YouTube. Great support for him and other tools. Yeah, that's the thing. Like if you're stuck on something, Google it or YouTube it. You can usually find stuff. But I appreciate you watching this YouTube channel. Thank you for the super chat, John. That was awesome. First super chat. Never had that happen before. So appreciate it and hope to see you all soon. And yeah, we'll see you on the